Thank you.
You're live.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert Gruler. I am the chairperson of the board of the Judicial Appointments Advisory Board. And tonight we are scheduled for a regular meeting of our board, the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board, Advisory Board. And first thing that we need to do, of course, at 6 p.m. Wednesday, May 5th, is call the meeting to order and take roll. And so I will go down the list of the board members. And if you are here, please say present. And I think it's important that we raise our hand when we speak so that the transcriber can properly notate who is speaking. So I will go down the list. If you're present, please say present. So first we'll start with Tricia Schaefer.
I am present.
We have Susan Marwill. Susan Marwill, Judge Marwill.
Yes, here. Sorry, I got disconnected for a moment, but I'm back.
Very good. We have Joseph Kiefer.
Present.
Laura Ingeniery.
Present.
Susan Galpin Tyree. Susan, did I hear from you?
Did, present.
Okay, sorry. And we have myself, of course, Robert Gruler. I am present. I got a voicemail from Brian Adamovich that he will not be present today at this meeting, but I was able to speak with counsel for the city, and based on our current numbers, we still have a quorum, and so we can proceed in his abstention during today's meeting. So before we move on to the next agenda item, want to make a quick note that as we go through this meeting, we have the ability to go into executive session as to agenda item number 5. What that means is that at any point that we're on that action item, that agenda item, if we believe it's necessary to go into an executive session, we can do that. We just have to do that on formal motion here. So just I want to make a note of that. We can move on to agenda item number 1, which is approval of February 17, 2021 minutes from the last Judicial Appointments Advisory Board meeting minutes. Did everybody get a copy of those meeting minutes via email? And everybody has had a chance to review them. If there are no objections to approving those meeting minutes, may I please have a motion on approval, unless there is any discussion for that.
This is Judge Morrell. I'll make a motion.
Very good. Do we have a second?
This is Susan Galpin Tyree. I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of approving the February 17, 2021 minutes? I think raise our hands or we say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we'll do both. Any opposed? All right, so the motion carries. Unless there are any objections, we can just move right on to agenda item number 2, which is introduction of our newest board member, who is Laura Ingeniery. How do I say that?
You were saying it correct, engineering. Just the second G is silent.
Engineering. We're
Correct.
grateful to have you on the board, Laura. My understanding is you've got some other experience on other boards and committees. So we look forward to your guidance and expertise on this board. We're grateful to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, so next agenda item, if there's no objections to moving on, we can go into public comments. And the purpose of this agenda item, is to give the public an opportunity to give comments or input regarding the performance or the reappointment of Associate City Judge Blake, which of course is why we're here today. If I did not mention that, that's the purpose of this meeting, is to have discussions about Judge Blake. We gave the public the opportunity to do that. My understanding is, unless anybody has any information otherwise, is that there were no public comments for today's meeting. And so unless there is any objection, I think we can close public comment on agenda item 3 and move into agenda item 4. Very good. So we will continue forward. Agenda item.
Excuse me, Robert,
Yes.
just to interrupt, can we just confirm with Michael Kane that we don't have any members of the public on the phone wanting to give a spoken comment during the meeting?
Very, very good. And that's a great point. Yeah, I did not receive any public comments by email, but if there is anybody available on the phone, Mr. Kane, can you confirm for us whether there are any other public comments through any other medium?
At present, I'm not showing anyone.
Okay. So we have, it sounds like no additional comments, public comments. So I think it's safe to say we can close public comments and then move on to agenda item 4, which is the discussion of the judicial survey results on the associate city judge for Judge Blake. And so as we enter this, just a quick reminder that we've got an obligation of confidentiality, and I know we all made did our due diligence, and so we just want to make sure that we're protecting the confidentiality of the survey results in this current discussion that we have. So the floor is open. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share with the rest of the board?
This is Judge Marwell. I would just note that the survey results indicated to me that he had very strong marks in knowledge of the law, and that the area in which he had some difficulty or could use improvement had more to do with temperament. So, and that was generally consistent with the due diligence that I had received. But even the people who raised concern about temperament said that they would vote to keep him on the bench and thought he was an asset to it. So sometimes people have a more cantankerous personality, and that may be the case for Judge Blake. That was just the thoughts that I had.
Thank you, Judge. Any other feedback from any other board members?
Go ahead, Judge Kiefer.
So I was just going to make a similar observation. I think the other piece of information we have that's consistent with what Judge Marwell said is there's some comments. I think they're identified to us as respondent comments. I won't get into the details or specifics, but I think in some of those, they generally reflect the same types of opinions concerning judicial temperament. I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if any of the other board members know or anybody else that can assist us how long Judge Blake has been on the bench.
Yes, he started as judge September 10, 2001. He took the oath of office September 11, 2001 for Scottsdale.
So, it can happen in a few different ways. Sometimes, a person's personality is a certain way. Sometimes they can tend to be strong when they start, and sometimes they can tend to be strong as they get through their judicial service after they've seen a lot of different things and a lot of different types of cases. I don't know whether we get to the interview part, whether it would make sense to address this matter and ask a question about it and see what Judge Blake has to say and his impressions. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Judge.
And I just want to make a friendly reminder here that for agenda item number 4, we're supposed to be limiting our discussion to the actual statistical survey results. The discussion of the due diligence and other interviews will come in during agenda item number 5. So just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heiser. Okay, so it sounds like, some of the feedback is similar, making notes of some of the statistical, well, let's say deviations. So, just I guess to make the record sort of clear, the two statistical survey results that I'm looking at, we have one that is a big universe of survey results that sounds like it is comprehensive of all of the judicial performance evaluations that have taken place over a long period of time. That's one set of survey results. And then we have Judge Blake's specific. So we can look at Judge Blake's relative to the global numbers. And when we do that, there are a couple aberrations. I mean, there are two that really stand out to me. And I see them both under subsection 4, Judicial Temperament. Understanding and compassion is a 2. And on the global number, it's a 3.1. So that is sort of a big deviation from the global numbers, because the global numbers, or let me put it this way, his numbers match the broader numbers on some of the other categories. So for example, his legal ability, his mean result, legal ability summary was a 3.1. On a global, it was a 3.2. So he's right in alignment with the norm there, or the mean, or whatever the mathematical proper term is. I'm a lawyer. All right. So we see that there's uniformity until we get down to understanding and compassion, and then the courteous numbers. That's where we see sort of a big difference there. It goes from a 3.1 and a 3.2, and then Judge Blake's results are both 2.0s for both of those. So a pretty big gap there that I just wanted to highlight on that topic. So any other thoughts or feedback on any of the statistical numbers? Yes, Suzanne Galpin. Tyree, you're still muted, by the way, so you may want to unmute yourself and raise your hand.
Thank you. I would just point out the key to those numbers reflects that 2 is satisfactory. So just reminding everybody, it's not a failing mark. It is kind of, it may not be where we want it to be in Scottsdale, but just to be mindful of, while there's a deviation there, to appreciate that it's an average. It's a C average, if you will. That's all I have to add.
Thank you, Susan.
I would like to just add one thing, and maybe I'm misreading this, but if you look at the defendant and witness column, the one under integrity, equal treatment regardless of race, is very low. In fact, 51 said it was unsatisfactory. It's evened out enough to the total where he's gotten above average. He's made up for it with the other categories, but that still is a little concerning. There's that many 51 that I felt that he was not treating people equal as a result of race.
Yeah, and so just so I'm clear on what number you're talking about.
Maybe I missed. It is.
I see it. Okay, so yes, I see it. I'm sorry. So it was subsection 2 under integrity,
Right.
equal regardless of race. 51 out of a total 79 said that they had unsatisfactory interactions on that topic. And on that second sheet, that's 65% of the defendants who came through there, which, yeah, that's
A little concerning.
that's anomalous. Yeah, no question. Staff numbers. I think it also is interesting to note that the staff numbers on the judicial temperament sort of reflect the general public's response on temperament. Also, not particularly good scores there. So Based on these numbers, it sort of looks to me like attorneys and staff agree. Looks like defendant scores on the judicial temperament category are also lower than the average by about half of a point, or a point by about 0.5. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other feedback? Okay, if there are no objections on the discussion of, or to moving on and concluding the discussion of the survey results, then we can move forward to agenda item number 5, which is the discussion of confidential records and confidential information related to Judge Blake's performance or reappointment. So I want to be clear here and just sort of read this advisory. The board may generally discuss and consider confidential records related to Judge Blake and may generally discuss and consider confidential information gathered during board member interviews of those who may have had personal experience related to Judge Blake's performance during the public meeting in a manner which does not violate confidentiality requirements. So we just got to keep that in mind. So this is the appropriate time now to have these conversations. A quick reminder that if necessary, we can make a motion to go into executive session, but I believe the preference is to not do that so that we can talk about these things in a manner that protects confidentiality. So we're on agenda item number 5. I think now might be the appropriate time to have conversations or to sort of segue into the conversations that Judge Kiefer and Judge Marwell brought forth previously. So any other thoughts on that, or Judge Kiefer or Judge Marwell, do you want to expand on your prior thoughts?
Go ahead, Judge Kiefer.
I simply adopt my previous comments and statements for the record.
Okay, and then we will discuss the questions that we should ask in the next agenda item, but any other feedback specific to your due diligence, I will share mine. A lot of my comments that I received during my due diligence also mirrored Judge Marwell's feedback, largely that there was some concerns about temperament specifically, and about certain dispositional characteristics of Judge Blake, but that they would still retain him because they do think that he's fair, really fair and impartial. That temperament problem is not directed at any one side. It's general. It's not towards defendants or prosecutors. It's kind of equal opportunity temperament. So that was my feedback, and it was very consistent from a number of the people that I spoke with.
I had similar feedback as well related to his temperament, but that it was equal on both sides.
Okay. Any other feedback on this that anybody would like to share?
Yeah, just consistent with the other feedback, and also that he is also, in addition to kind of treating both sides the same, he's very consistent and very rule driven, very procedure driven.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Anybody else? Okay, if there is nothing further and no other objections, then I propose we move forward and go to agenda item number 6, which is a discussion on questions for the interview of Judge Blake. So we already have a couple, I think, that are floating around. Ms. Ingeniery, I don't know if you want to take the lead on the question about that racial abnormality, if you're comfortable with that. but I remember that came up. Judge Kiefer, I think maybe you mentioned something about temperament and specifically maybe how that became something that's developed over his tenure in Scottsdale. I'm not sure if you want to ask that question or take that. I'm just throwing out some stuff that I heard.
I think I would probably state it more as this is some of the feedback we've received and what are his thoughts on it, and explore whether there's any plan to address it at 20 years on the bench. I would be curious about that and how he would respond to that.
Okay, so I will write that one down.
This is Judge Marvel. I think before we raise the issue of temperament, I would be curious if we were to ask him an open-ended question about his strengths and weaknesses, if he would be able to identify the same strengths and weaknesses that other people who come before him do. So I think that I would pose a general question about his strengths and weaknesses, and then I would hope that he would have the self-awareness to identify what those are, and then perhaps Judge Kiefer's question could be a follow-up question more related to how he plans to address that, or to give people a slightly different experience. Although I would note that some people, based on their background, may just tend to present more that way, because the comments that I got indicated that he had been a prosecutor and had a nickname that I indicated in the comments, so that would seem to go with the way that he's perceived. So I think I'd give him the opportunity to identify his own strengths and weaknesses before just asking him a question about what we perceive to be a weakness. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Judge Kiefer.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm willing to defer if you want to ask the first question, and then if you feel like it's most appropriate to just continue on and follow on, you can ask, and if I have anything after that, I'll follow up. So you can go ahead and run lead. Run
That's
point.
fine. I don't really have a preference if you wanted to do it, but I'm happy to do it as well.
Sure.
So.
Okay, so yeah, how about we start with you, Judge Marwell, and then we'll see if Judge Kiefer has any follow-up. Any other questions?
Just to confirm, he has received a copy of these survey results, correct? Or has he not?
No, he is not.
Oh, will he receive them at some point?
I'm not sure. Stephanie, is he allowed to get a copy of these?
Maybe Donna can jump in on how you've handled it in the past. I'm sure that they're available to him. They are a matter of public record. I don't know at what point he will get provided a copy of those under typical circumstances.
I don't think we have anything typical, so whatever legal guidance you want to provide, we'll proceed.
Okay, perhaps we can consider, he can get a copy after, of course. It's a little bit late now to give it to him before the meeting. And then going forward for our next year's reappointments, we'll make a decision about whether to give the judges the survey results prior to, and we'll keep the board informed of that decision.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? It feels to me like the feedback that we got is very unidirectional on temperament and that topic. Are there other questions?
It's Judge Marwell. It's
Yes.
Judge Marwell again. I think I would ask him, Judge Kiefer referenced that he's already been on the Scottsdale bench 20 years. So I think I would ask him to discuss, what he would like to see happen in the next several years, and like what are his goals for if we vote to reappoint him or to recommend his reappointment rather to the city council, what would he like to see and how would he keep improving the Scottsdale bench? Because I don't think we want to ask him questions that are so narrowly focused. I think we want to get a sense for ourselves of who he is.
Okay. Like to see, yeah. I've got that down. Anything else? Any other COVID related questions that are worth diving into? Or do we think that is maybe unnecessary at this stage? I'm just trying to think of other areas that might be worth inquiring about. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Otherwise, I have a list of about 4 of them.
Just to confirm then, is it acceptable to ask the question, since I'm new, directly related to these survey results? Since he hasn't seen them, is it okay for me to say the survey results show that for defendants and witnesses that you have a number of individuals that have indicated it was unsatisfactory the way that you treated individuals? Well, I would just equal treatment regardless of race. So is it okay to be that specific, Stephanie, or do I need to be more careful because he has not seen this survey?
No, I think that it's fair for you to ask that. I mean, that is a body of information, and you are questioning him on his merit and his in an impartial manner based on the information you have, and I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there, I see Judge Kiefer. I think you have your hand up.
I would just suggest possibly on the last question, and I'll defer if you want to ask it specifically that way, but there might be another word than using the unsatisfactory category, something more along the lines of, some or a number of the respondents in those categories indicated concerns about treatment of certain groups or ever, as opposed to unsatisfactory, but I would leave that to you. I know that's what the data indicates, just my suggestion.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
What about specifics? Specifics on some. I guess maybe this will be a follow-up question, but I would be curious to know what he's been attempting to do, if anything, on the temperament issue, because he may not know about it based on these results, but he's been a judge for a long period of time, and I'm going to guess that this has been an ongoing concern. But I guess if that's not in evidence on this particular case, maybe it's not worth diving into. So I think I just talked myself out of that. But all right. So any other thoughts or any other questions before we move on to the next item?
I think you could rephrase your last question as Judge Marvel again and say a general question. In your view, what is the appropriate judicial temperament for a judge to have? And then, of course, the follow-up question is, do you believe you reached that ideal? Because I think that would give you more of a sense of whether he believes that he has an issue to be addressed or not, without referencing things he may not have knowledge of in specifics.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have that written down. Okay, if there are no other questions or no other objections, I propose we move on to agenda item number 7, which is the interview of Judge Blake. So I think we will call Mr. Kane to bring Judge Blake in from the breakout room, and I think we're prepared for the interview.
All right, will do. I'll be back momentarily.
Thank you. Judge Blake. Good to see you.
Whoa.
Good evening. So we got Mr. Kane back in the room. I think we're ready to proceed. So good evening, Judge Blake. My name is Robert Gruler. Of course, you are here with the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board. Thank you for your patience in allowing us to do some of our background due diligence. This is the time we're on agenda item number 7, of course, which is the interview with you. We just finished having a conversation about some questions that we would like to propose your direction. And so before we begin, do you have any questions, or do you have an opening statement that you would like to give to the board, or are you just ready for questions?
Just ready for questions.
All right, so we'll just get right into it. I think Judge Marwell is going to start us off.
Good evening, Judge Blake. I was just wondering if you could talk to us about what you believe to be your greatest strength and then your greatest weakness, if you would be so kind.
Well, I think my greatest strength would be is that I like studying the law. I teach the law in the Arizona Judicial Commission or Committee or Conference. I teach it to the magistrates. I teach it to the JPs, and I like to read every single case that comes in, whether it addresses lower courts, that sort of thing, or even the death penalty, which of course never occurs in Scottsdale. And of course, I'm an opponent of the death penalty, so it never would come up to that, but I like the legal aspects of it. And I think that helps when you're a judge, and you have to make quick decisions when there's an objection. You kind of have to know the law that's occurring. You have to know the new areas that are occurring, that sort of thing. I think a weakness would be I tend to make decisions too quickly, and I have to stop myself sometime and reconsider. Like a lot of times I'll be listening to someone and I can't get their point, and I'll ask them. I go, I'm missing why you think this is important, and they'll tell me. And then a lot of times you go, okay, I see your issue now, and that helps a lot. But I think I tend to make decisions a little too quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And next up, we've got Judge Kiefer. I think we have a question from you.
Yes, good evening, Judge Blake. Appreciate you being here tonight. I'm sorry I'm not video enabled, but can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great, thank you. So I will be honest, we collect different types of information through this process. And some of it has suggested, and this is by no means 100%, but there were some comments and data points related to judicial temperament and some concerns by some people, not specific individuals, but again, data points on your judicial temperament. And I wanted to see if you wanted to comment on that at all. Is that something that you've heard at any other time in your career, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm a very strict judge, and that comes out. I always try to make sure I hear everyone's point of view. I always try to make sure that they understand my point of view. So I think, it depends on how people view things. I am a strict judge. I don't deny that. I'm not a particularly touchy-feely person, that sort of thing. But I try to make sure that people understand that I'm listening to them. I understand what they're saying. And one of the answers I brought up earlier is, if I don't understand what you're saying, I try to get it out of you. And the reason I try to get it out of you as to what you're trying to say or what you're trying to get across of is, if I don't understand your point, then you're not going to win on that point. And I want to give you the opportunity to make sure I understand it. Now, sometimes even when I understand your point, you're not going to win. But I've had cases where I just didn't get what their issue was. And then when I asked them about it, inquired about it, and they explained it to me, suddenly the light went on. And I knew, okay, I see what you're trying to say. I now get your point. And then I turn to the opposite side. How do you respond to that? They seem to be making a valid point. Can you respond to that? And sometimes, people take strictness, or they take me questioning them in the wrong way. But I'm trying to get as much information I can so I can make the right decision. Because one of the things that I really hate as a judge is, and you find this out occasionally, that you made the wrong decision. And I really dislike that when I find out, when I have additional facts or something new occurs in a case, that I made the wrong decision. And I try not to do that.
Let me just ask in quick follow-up. Do you have a certain concept of or a type of judicial temperament that you are trying to achieve? And I understand circumstances are different and you're faced with different situations, but is there a general type of judicial temperament that you're working toward or trying to convey?
Well, not really, because every circumstance is different. You can have, cases where the person it's amazing that they came to court. Their life is so dysfunctional and they're having so much problems that you tend to be more lenient with that person or deal with them differently. We had recently a case where the person hasn't shown up to court twice and told the staff that he was going to come in and slap me, even though he's never been to court. And I've never even met the person. And I just think with that person, I don't think you'd be as lenient.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate it.
Judge, I have a follow-up question. Do you think that judicial temperament is important in the administration of justice from almost like from a defendant perspective or from a public facing perspective in terms of upholding or helping the public believe that they're getting sort of a fair shake? I know this wasn't a very artful question, but some of the feedback that I got, I guess, let me talk about this in terms of feedback, is that people feel like some of the responses have been that they feel like they're getting hurried out of your courtroom, or that they're not getting the attention or the time necessary to communicate with you in order to address their legal issue. And you just said something about, making very quick decisions, and people are interpreting that as a temperament, issue. How are you sort of balancing all of those different variables so that the Scottsdale City Court is making people who come through it feel heard and like they're getting a fair shake?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't think it's just important for the defendant. I also think it's important for the parties, the lawyers, the defendant, the witnesses, the victim, the prosecutor. One of the things I try to do on that is I do try to, when I don't understand the issue, ask questions and try to get it. And what I'm worried about on that sometimes when I do it is you got to be careful that it doesn't seem like you're interrogating the person or you're taking one side over the other. I'm just trying to find out, what are you trying to communicate to me that I'm not getting? So I try to do that. Another thing is like, if I see an issue like that and it's starting to rise and I can see the frustration sometimes, I'll try to say, take your time. Just take your time. One of the things I've noticed that occurs occasionally is myself and the defendant will be cutting each other off, because I'll hear something he says and I want to ask about it. And one of the things I've tried to deal with that on is say, look, you're cutting me off and I don't particularly like that. But on the other part, I'm cutting you off. And I'm sure you don't particularly like it when I do that to you. So this is what we're going to do. So both are going to be fair. I'm going to hear everything you say, and I am not going to cut you off at all. But once you're done, I want you to do me the same courtesy and hear everything I say without cutting him off. Because I feel it's not right for me to object that you're cutting me off when I'm cutting you off. So when I see that situation arise, and you can see it with the frustration sometimes, I try to backstep everything and move it down. Other things I try to do is tell people, take your time. I'm nervous, take your time. We had a guy today, just a trial I did earlier, where he was saying he was having some trouble because he had his COVID shot. And I'd had my second COVID shot a couple of weeks ago and understand what he's talking about. I go, well, if you need some time, we can break. Because actually it was my last trial for the day and I had plenty of time. And I go, if you need time, we'll just break. He wanted to proceed and with closing argument, and we did. But I offered him the time that we can stop while you want.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but is it fair to say that you do not think that you have a judicial temperament problem?
I'm correct. I don't think I do. I think everyone views things differently, but I don't think I do. And of course, too, we do run a high volume case. They do move courtrooms. They do move cases through. They do tend to go through quickly.
Okay.
If people want more time, I try to give it to them.
Okay. We're going to go, I think we have another question that's queued up that's going to go into some survey results that we got, but based on the due diligence that the city helped us gather. And when I look at the survey results, and we talked about this earlier in the meeting, we have kind of two types of results. We have a global result that shows all of the Scottsdale judges for a big period of time, years, I forget specifically what it is, but it's a global number. Then we have your results, and we can compare and we can contrast them. And so what we see is for subsection, the subsection specifically about judicial temperament, your scores are almost a full point under the global average. And so those numbers to me indicate that there's an anomaly there, which is why I ask about it. But if you say nope, that this is a legitimate style of being a judge, and this is in the best interest of justice, I just want to give you the opportunity to sort of confirm that.
Sure. I don't claim to be a perfect person. I'm not. I am stricter than a lot of people. Not everyone, but stricter than a lot of people. And I understand why people view it that way sometimes. When I do see it, I try to correct it and try to take care of it, because I don't want them treating me badly, and I don't want to treat them badly. We're all human beings, and we should be treated with a certain amount of respect as to what's going on. But I am stricter, to be honest. I can't dispute that. That is true.
Yeah, and to be fair, the feedback has been that you've been equally strict across the board. So it's been consistent. Okay, so on that note, maybe we can pass the question over to Ms. Engineering about some more survey results.
Good evening, Judge Blake. I'm Laura Engineering. I'm the newest member of this board. Nice to meet you. I'm kind of making my way through some of these survey results, and one thing that did come up that I wanted to ask you about, it's not going to be an easy question, but the numbers do kind of prompt the question. So the surveys were done with attorneys, defendants and witnesses, jury, and staff members. So they were all broken down for us. In the area of the defendant and the witness surveys, there was a significant number that questioned your equal treatment regardless of race. Do you know what might attribute those scores?
No, I don't know what the cases they're talking about or what issues they're talking about.
And we don't know either. We just have those numbers, and it was, like I said, a significant number that pointed out that may not be occurring.
Sure. No, I don't know on that. Having been the hate crime prosecutor and written the hate crime laws of Arizona, I don't discriminate or try to do anything like that. So I'm not really, if I had a case or an instance where they're talking about, I could address it, but I'm not sure what they're talking about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think we had one final question from Judge Marwell. It was about sort of your future vision for the court. Ms. Marwell, are you still available for that question?
Yes, we had all noted that you'd been on the court since 2001. So we just wondered what goals you have for your future judicial career and how you could help the city of Scottsdale bench in the future. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to having more in-person court appearances. For instance, we're just now moving back into doing arraignments again, because arraignments, a lot of times cases could be resolved and the person didn't have to keep coming back to court or keep calling in, that sort of thing. Because actually we're able to physically meet with the prosecutor right then and there and maybe resolve their case. And we're talking about starting that again next week, I believe. We're going to start off in courtroom 2, and then it'll probably come to my courtroom next. I've really liked the restitution court that was created, that I run. We're getting a lot of money back for victims. I meet with the defendants, and that it was kind of an inventive thing that I actually got from one of the defendants. What I was doing is having people come in every month in order to make their restitution payment and meet with me to make sure they were making their restitution payment. And the defendant actually brought up to me when one of our talks is that, he's going to lose his job if he has to come in once a month, every afternoon. And so him and I talked about it. And what we decided to do was I would still set the cases every month. But what I would do is that afternoon, I would check if they made the restitution payment that myself, the victim, and they agreed to pay. They didn't have to come in, and I would reset the court date for them. If they didn't make the payment, then they'd have to explain to me why they didn't make the payment when they could. So I thought that kind of worked out well for all parties. And that was an example where, I heard the defendant. They actually came up with a really good idea. I mean, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. The defendant actually suggested it to me, and we resolved that issue through there. So I really like the restitution court. I want to continue on with my teaching. With COVID, I didn't get to teach at all this year. And I'm already scheduled to teach at the Judicial Conference in June, the JP's conference in September, if I'm still here, of course. And then I also teach here at the courthouse. I teach new case law. I teach new laws that occurred, so that all the staff has it. But I still want to keep on teaching, still want to keep on, I want to do more in-persons in the courtroom because I think that helps a lot too when you see people. We do a lot over the phone, and it's not the same thing. It does help. It's moved our caseload really well in Scottsdale. A lot of other courts have huge backups. We don't because of that, but I still think you get something out of seeing the people. You get a better feel for how they are, and they get a better feel for you if you can actually meet in person.
Judge Marwell, any other follow-up on that?
No, that was helpful, at least to me. I don't know if it opened anything for anybody else.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, any other questions? That was it from my queue. All right, if there's no objections, then Judge Blake, thank you so much for appearing here tonight, and thank you for your patience. We appreciate your service, and we'll wish you a good night.
Well, thank you, and I know you all volunteer, so I appreciate your service because I get paid to do this, so it's not that hard for me. Thank you always.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Kane, I think, is it the appropriate time to move Mr. Blake into a breakout room?
Yep,
And
we'll move them now.
thank you. All right, so it looks like Mr. Judge Blake has left the room. So if there are no objections, I propose then we move on to agenda item number 8, which is discussion of and the reappointment recommendation regarding Judge Blake. So any thoughts? Anyone want to kick off the discussion? So I'm happy to get us started. So the feedback that I got was largely in alignment with the feedback that sounds like most of you got, and some of this feedback that we got from Judge Blake in that interview, largely that temperament is a problem, and from the community's perspective, but Judge Blake, I think, doesn't see it quite that way. Now, that being said, even though there's that dynamic there, the people that I spoke to who sort of had issue with judicial temperament, they were very consistent in saying that he's a good judge and he's at least fair. So even though he's strict, as he says, with both sides, or in general, he is with both sides, and so I think that serves Scottsdale in that capacity. Some of my reservations are regarding his sort of inability to see that as a potential issue, because I do think that it doesn't serve Scottsdale very well if people think that their judges don't care about them or their cases, even though he very well may. If they don't feel that, then I'm not sure that is is what Scottsdale wants. All that, all said and done, though, I still think I would support reappointment at this point, unless I hear, some sort of compelling, contrary opinions. But that's a jumping off point.
Yeah, I would agree. With my experience at the state level, I had heard that there's a coach that's available for judges where they can videotape their interactions during court proceedings. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. I don't know if it's something that might benefit him, so that he actually sees maybe how he's being perceived by those that come before him.
What you're referring to is called the Judicial Observation Program.
Okay.
I don't know if this, just because I've done it myself, I think it's always good to see yourself, because unfortunately you don't always have the greatest insight into who you are, or at least what you are perceived as. I don't know if the city of Scottsdale has that available. It's available to Superior Court judges, but I don't, one of the people, does counsel for city of Scottsdale know that, or do we have to raise that as a question for a future?
I don't know that. I haven't heard of such a program, but I can check with the lawyer that represents the city court to find out if that.
If it would
program-
be helpful to you, I have an email that I can forward to you when I get back to work that tells you the contact that we use at Superior Court to request that. And because that's who we use. And so if you want that as a jumping off point, I can send that to you just for informational purposes, if that would be helpful.
Sure, thank you.
All
This is
right.
Donna Brown. I would also suggest talking to Judge Oklabaj about that as well.
Okay, can do that.
Judge Kiefer, you got your hand raised.
I was just going to note again, I think somebody brought up earlier, although relative to his other data points, that judicial temperament is certainly lower, and that's lower relative to all of the survey results. It's not in the zone that's in that unsatisfactory or that level just above that. It's still in the satisfactory level. And I think, as he noted, we're not all great at everything. It was a little concerning, I think, especially coming from us and the questions asked, that he didn't seem a little more open to the idea that there may be a temperament issue. I felt like in my questions, I wasn't even necessarily in a position to push the issue of, well, what would you do about it? Because it's like it hadn't even been considered. But I'm hopeful moving forward that, based on our questions, and if he has access to the data, that may be something that prompts him to look at that issue moving forward. And I think his other areas are fairly strong in terms of his knowledge of the law and his decision-making and some of those other categories. So I would support reappointment at this time.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you. I also would support reappointment, and I watched and listened to him carefully, as I know we all did, and while certainly his demeanor kind of is what it is, he did seem somewhat concerned about the race statistics, and I think that sharing the survey with him may be somewhat enlightening. And I mean, he seems genuinely concerned about getting it right, and in connection with that, I was impressed with his explanation about how he conducts his courtroom so that litigants and the court don't interrupt each other. And while no one wants to be told to sit down and be quiet until I'm finished talking, sort of thing, it is a technique that can be effective, and just a little bit of a change of verbiage may make it go down a little better. And so, to me, he strikes me as a seasoned judge who's trying to get it right, and would be open to some feedback and training in this area, because he has extensive experience in being a trainer, in being an educator, in being a teacher on the substance and on the procedure. And so if any sort of temperament enhancement, if you will, is presented to him in a way that it's like a teaching and learning opportunity in the same area. And so to me, he strikes me as someone who is open to modest modification in the temperament area. But his record and his, the feedback that I got in connection with knowledge and consistency and procedural integrity, it would definitely warrant retention.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Who have we not heard from? Anybody else? Any thoughts, any opinions?
This is Judge Marwell. I would say, although the temperament issue does appear concerning, I'll just remind everybody that the people who responded to the survey, if you look at the raw numbers, the half of the respondents are not even that many people. So when you look at survey results, you need to consider that the people who respond may be the people who wanted to comment on something either from a positive or a negative result. So we simply don't know what everyone who comes in front of him means. I will tell you that from my perspective, if a judge was adamant that they're not going to change their opinion of the law and they had a misunderstanding and could not be moved off of it, that would be more concerning to me than someone who sometimes appeared to lack compassion. I would also note that when you've been a judge for 20 years, and I have not, so I'm just extrapolating, that you become somewhat hardened to some of the issues that you see on a day-to-day. For the average person, you don't deal with drug offenses every day. And so you may feel more empathy to someone struggling with drugs, for example, and that's just an example. But as you deal with something day in and day out for years on end, whether we like it or not, almost as a protective shield, one has to harden themselves to the issues that come before them. And that can certainly be interpreted as a lack of compassion. So I'm not saying that's going on with Judge Blake, and I certainly would have liked for him to have a little more introspection than he showed in the answers to some of his questions. But in his defense, if he didn't have the survey results, the questions could have taken him by surprise. So I guess I would be interested in the city of Scottsdale having a discussion on why the interviewee is not given their own survey results and being able to analyze them and have a little self-reflection. Because without them, I kind of think it's a black box and you don't know what you're coming into. So I would certainly vote for retention, because in the areas that I feel are most important to the integrity of a bench, he excels. I certainly acknowledge the issue. I'm just pointing out that it needs to be viewed through a lens of what he does every day, day in and day out. And he certainly did strike me as someone who cares about the people who come before them. And so perhaps he just needs to become more artful in how he articulates that.
Thank you, Judge. And Ms. Galpin Tyree.
Yes, thank you. I would suggest that, well, first of all, I echo what Judge Marwell stated. She said some of the things that I would have said exactly. The other thing is in relationship or relative to the question about race and perhaps, his not being, what was the word used, Ms. Anganeri, was?
On the survey?
Correct.
Equal treatment regardless of race is what this survey.
These kinds of answers are subjective, understanding they're all subjective to a degree, but it's a very small sampling. This kind of thing would trouble me if I were the judge. I would want to see the data, and I would also like to, if I were he, see an example or hear an example of what that really means. Who were those people who answered that, going deeper into the survey? Were they found guilty? Just a lot of factors come into play for that. So it's a real sensitive situation, I understand. But I would agree that overall that I would suggest he be reappointed. Everybody is different. Diversity is key. We cannot all be the same temperament. We will not and are not. So I think I would vote or suggest that he be reappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galpin Tyree. Okay, I think we've heard from everybody, unless I'm forgetting anybody, or if yes, okay. So if there are no objections, then I think it may be time for us to take a formal vote on whether to recommend reappointment of Judge Blake. So if there are no objections, can we take a roll call vote by show of hands and eyes? All in favor of recommending the reappointment of Judge Blake? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so with no oppositions and unanimous votes in favor of reappointment, I think we have that settled, that the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board will recommend to the Scottsdale City Council the reappointment of Judge Blake. So that brings us to agenda item number 9. If there are no objections, I think we can move forward to that item. Ms. Galpin Tyree, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's a leftover. It looks like it was. Okay. So as to it, yes.
Just as a matter of, oh, my earphones are giving me trouble. Can you make a motion as well on for a determination on how you are going to make that recommendation to City Council?
Yes, correct. And I apologize for skipping over that. We also need to discuss how we are going to formalize that recommendation to the City Council. Previously, I have drafted a letter that I'm happy to draft and send back over to the City Council, just announcing our recommendation. If you would like me to do that again, I'm happy to do that. If somebody else wants to take that responsibility, I'm happy to pass the torch. Does anybody have a motion on that?
This is Donna Brown. If you don't mind me interjecting, we do have on the consent agenda item for the reappointment of Judge Blake. So we can include that letter that you would like to write with the consent agenda item for the City Council if you'd like.
Apologies. I don't understand the formality of what that means exactly, but the last time we did this, I just drafted a letter and I sent it over to Ms. Asmus, and she took it from there. So if that's what you're referencing, I'm happy to do that. If there's an alternative mechanism, I'm also open to that.
It's more or less a formality. We just have it on consent, and we can include that item with the consent agenda item so the council has the full package and they can see your consent.
Yes, and that is actually what we did last time, Robert, and we started with your letter. Yes, so yeah, and I think that it's things are working a little differently because of COVID and we're not meeting in person.
Okay.
So yes, Ms. Brown is correct. We will do it that way after you get us the letter, once the motion is made as to who's going to do that.
Very, very good. Okay, so do we have a motion? Does that sound reasonable to the board? If somebody wants to make a motion and second.
I'll make the motion. It's Judge Marwell that we have you draft a letter again, since you've already got one in the works. If you were to need help or someone to revise it, I'd be happy to assist you if you needed, but sounds like you already have a template for what we need. So I don't see any reason to rock that particular boat, but I'll make that motion if you don't mind.
Thank you, Judge. No, I do not mind. Ms. Galpin Tyree.
Second that motion.
All right, all in favor of having me draft the formal letter and sending it over to the appropriate people, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. I will be drafting the letter and sending it over promptly to the appropriate parties. Okay. Anything else on that, Ms. Heiser? Can I move on to agenda number 9?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so moving on, agenda number 9, Judge Stacia Hendricks, Judge Joseph Olkovaj, judicial reappointment timelines. I think we have Ms. Asmus, who's going to tell us more about that, I believe.
Yes, I sent you guys over just one timeline because they both expire at the same time. So if anybody has anything that they want to change, or if they see anything that stands out to them on that, but as of right now, that's the dates that we have for them. So
Can you maybe advise us on, or if this is not the appropriate venue, but there are some expirations that are happening sort of in this timeline. Can you?
what expirations? I'm sorry.
Expirations of terms for board members.
For board members?
Yeah.
Well, as board members are coming up, I believe 2 of them are coming up in September. Actually, that's you and our vice chair. Yes. So hopefully you guys want to re-up for a second term. If not, you would just need to let us know, and then the city would put out on the website for new board members.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Asmus. Do we have any other comments or discussion, questions about anything there? All right. If there are no objections, then we can move on to agenda item number 10, which is discussion regarding COVID-19 related impacts on survey collection and overall performance results. And I think this may have been a carryover from the last meeting. And I just want to open the floor if there's any discussion on that.
I think I had brought this up at the last meeting. It's Judge Marwell. I brought it up because from a perspective at our court, it was something that the judge representatives on the what's for Superior Court is called JPR, Judicial Performance Review, brought up. And I had mentioned that there were certain changes both to the survey collection, time periods, and some other things. And I think the feedback we initially got was that they had been doing survey collection by email even pre-COVID, if I recall correctly, so that it didn't seem as much of an issue as it was for the Superior Court, which had previous to COVID done most of its survey collection on paper. But I think we wanted to just put the agenda item to make sure that we had the correct understanding and didn't want to make any recommendations to the council for the board or the city council itself to address with the city council.
Yeah, that's, I remember now, Judge Marwell, thank you for that. Yeah, and we did follow up on that. So there's basically a provision of Scottsdale Code that says that this board is only empowered to do certain things, and that is making recommendations on the reappointment of judges. It's not, I don't think we have the power, in other words, to go and make formal recommendations as a board, but we can, make sort of, informal recommendations to HR or the city in different venues. But my understanding is that the powers of this board do not extend to that. And the feedback that I also got was that the explanation that we get on the front page of the survey results is it. Like that's how they do the surveys, and that's the extent of our sort of inquiry based on the powers that are delegated to us from the Scottsdale City Code. So that's my understanding of it. Just to share that with the group. All right. Any other feedback, any discussion on that item? Okay. And if no objections, then we've got our last agenda item is future agenda items. And I don't think we have any. which means I think we're done for the evening. So I think lastly, if there are no objections, we can move to adjourn. Somebody want to make that formal motion?
I so move. This is Susan.
Thanks, Susan. I
Okay.
second the motion. All in favor of adjourning the May meeting of the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board, hands and say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all your input here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thanks.
evening.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
All right, pausing the recording.